So, how do you grow? What is your methodology?
Man, I've done nearly everything for, it's been about 30 years. Um, but we just started doing that horizontal system thanks to you, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Um, how are you liking it?
I love it, man. I can't, we I guess I'd say that I've always tried to grow organically. I've probably done 2 or 3 salt grows in the last 30 years. It's been almost all organic. Um, and is just trying to kind of experiment, with the salt stuff. I was a little worried there for a minute when everyone was starting to get all these crazy microbial testing, that we might end up going down that road with, from what I understand, a lot of those places you can't really pass testing if you've got soil in the room. And so that hasn't happened. And we I did soil for a while in the commercial, and then we went to cocoa. Um, then we went to cocoa cubes. The cocoa, we would do like an amended cocoa. And that first test that I sent you guys, that's what that was. I did a sap analysis with New Age a year and a half ago, and that was an amended cocoa. And then I would also liquid feed some organic nutrients. And then it was just too much labor in amending all that cocoa and bringing the pots in and out of the room every 2 months. And mixing and just staying up on all that stuff. And the cultivation's in the middle of nowhere, so it's hard to get labor out there. And then so then I went to the cubes. The problem with the cubes is you can't really amend the cubes, and it cut down. It used to take me like 3 weeks to transplant everything, and when I went to the cubes, it took me like 3 days to transplant everything. Um, but still, and then that was great for a run or two. And then what I realized is when I had the amended cocoa, the plants were healthier, than in just cocoa with liquid organic nutrients. And then once your plant health, I mean, they looked healthy. Once your plant health goes down, then the bugs follow you in, right? Um, so then I went back to amended cocoa, and then I was just like looking at the horizon. We have 2 rooms in our facility, and I was only running one room. It was all I could do to run one room by myself, pretty much. And I was just like, man, there's no way I'll be able to ever to use our second room, because I can't barely keep up with the one room. And then I started looking at living soil, and that's when I started Googling living soil recipes. And I'm just like, man, this is BS. Like, no one's got any sand, silt, or clay in their living soil recipe, and everyone's bragging about they've got the best living soil, but none of them have soil. And I was like, what the hell, And then I think I was commenting on a FCP podcast and something asking about the recipes, and someone's like, oh, you got to watch Leighton's horizontal system. They're mixing soil in the driveway. And I remember watching you do an episode. I don't know if you were in it, but I remember the FCP guy was doing is mixing a lot organics alive in his driveway. And they're like, no, it's a different one, it's a horizontal system. I'm like, well, they're like, just look up the Leighton's video. I'm like, man, Leighton's been on here like 1,000 times. And they told me Google or YouTube search soil horizon system Leighton Morrison. So then I went back and was like, oh, okay. And I found the Shango
Yep.
shaping fire. And then you're the one that you did on the FCP on the horizontal system. And then watching that was really funny, because as I was trying to do my own research on living soil, I knew that to have soil, you had to have sand, silt, and clay. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's get a little bit more deep into this. What's sand, silt, and clay, right? And then it gets down to like the particle size. I'm like, well, that's bullshit. Like, I don't care what particle size my clay's at. There's got to be different, clay structures out there. And then I watched your episode, and you griped about the same thing, and I was like, all right, man, this guy's on the same page. Like, this is right up my alley. And so that really, sealed the deal when we had a lot of the same, concerns and gripes about this industry. And, and also that, to have a true living soil, and it's not really still yet, as you'll say, a true soil, but it's much closer than the low tension living soils that most people run. And so that's kind of what brought me to the system, man.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you found it because anyone that's done it, or I shouldn't say anyone, a lot of people that have done it have hit me back up to thank me because it just made watering so much easier. They had way better yields. They didn't have the bug problems or nor fungal pressures. So it really kind of opened their eyes to the fact that there are better ways to do it. And again, all I did was copy friggin' nature, right?
Right.
It was common sense, or I was forced to do it because of the jobs that I was working on. Landscape architects inappropriately planting plants on top of each other and then having only one irrigation zone for two different plants that like totally different soil environments. So that's what drove me to it. And then on top of that, once I entered into the cannabis space, I realized that yeah, they were using these soilless mediums, which is what I've nicknamed it. And the original, the OGs, well, they were doing it outdoors. So yeah, they were digging a hole and putting in the potting mix. But as soon as that plant got beyond that hole, they were back in soils again. And
Right.
that's why they were so successful before camp showed up and they had to put everything indoors and bury containers and get all kinds of crazy. And what they did was they followed their parents or their grandparents' recipes for the super soils, and then they had all these problems. So it was kind of like, hey, why don't you look at what your grandparents actually was doing? Think about it on a bigger picture. Dude, I got laughed off the stage twice for suggesting this because people just didn't believe that it would work. And the ones that tried were like, "Holy shit, this is making my life so much easier." So I'm happy to hear that. And again, it's like I'm here to try to help people, avoid making those costly mistakes that most people do when they enter into the space. Is like, yeah, cannabis is a weed. It'll do fine by itself, but if you're really trying to push the genetic potential of that plant, then you need all the tools in your toolbox, right? You can't just throw it in the ground and walk away from
Wh- What I've come to realize is, like when I did our first SAP analysis, they have a part of the questionnaire when you send your samples in is, what's your plant health, 1 out of 5, right? And man, my plants were so sick like 3 or 4 weeks before I did the analysis, and I just got them back on track, and they looked amazing. But I'm like, growing, if your plants were super sick 3 weeks ago, that they're still not really healthy yet. They don't just you're not 100. You don't have a super sick plant that looks like it's about to die, and 30 days later it's 100%.